Marrakesh, Morocco, at the United Nations Climate Summit. This is Democracy Now!
President-elect Trump, I formally invite you to Fiji and promise you the warmest of welcomes. We will show you how we are already having to move entire communities out of the way of the rising seas. And you can meet the families of the 44 Fijians who were killed last February by the biggest tropical cyclone ever to make landfall in the southern hemisphere.
The Prime Minister of Fiji makes a personal appeal to Donald Trump, who may soon become the only world leader who does not believe in climate change. We'll get the latest on the UN Climate Summit and look at an issue that's barely received coverage here, the Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara, which many consider to be Africa's last colony.
22, the climate talks that are being held in Marrakesh this month, an excellent opportunity for the Makhzen, which is the king and the ruling elite around him, to whitewash, their crimes, the repression, the authoritarianism, and also make people forget about the occupation that has been ongoing for more than 4 decades in Western Sahara.
We'll speak with a British Algerian activist who was blocked from entering Western Sahara during the UN Climate Summit. And we'll go to the streets of Marrakesh to speak with Syrian refugees who fled here to escape war.
I want to ask him why they want to close the borders first. Syrians have suffered very much. Why should they close the borders in our faces? They should help us because we've gone through a lot of suffering and lost everything.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Marrakesh, Morocco, from the UN Climate Summit. Back in the United States, Donald Trump has chosen Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions to be Attorney General. Sessions is a former prosecutor who was elected to the Senate in 1996. As an Alabama senator, he's consistently supported anti-immigration legislation. In 2010, he was a leading proponent of the efforts to repeal the 14th Amendment, which grants citizenship to everyone born in the United States. Jeff Sessions has also been a vocal opponent of the Voting Rights Act. In 1986, President Ronald Reagan nominated Sessions for a federal judgeship, but he was denied confirmation because of his history of racist comments, including reportedly saying he thought the Ku Klux Klan, quote, was okay until I found out they smoked pot, unquote. He's also called the American Civil Liberties Union and the NAACP un-American and communist-inspired. Meanwhile, officials from Donald Trump's transition team have told multiple news outlets that Trump has offered Lieutenant General Michael Flynn the position of National Security Advisor. Flynn is well known for his anti-Muslim worldview, having called Islam a cancer and saying, quote, fear of Muslims is rational, unquote. General Flynn is also on the board of advisors for Act for America, an anti-Muslim organization that's been designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. This position of National Security Advisor does not require Senate confirmation. Flynn served as the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency under President Obama, during which time some of his subordinates invented the term Flynn facts to refer to the false claims Flynn frequently made, including claiming Sharia law was spreading in the United States. Flynn was a key advisor for Donald Trump during the 1916 campaign, during which he refused to condemn Trump's proposed use of torture. Human Rights Watch said his pick shows, quote, a deeply disturbing disregard for human rights principles and the laws of war, unquote. Another controversial military figure, former CIA director and retired U.S. Army General David Petraeus, is reportedly in the running for Secretary of State. In 2015, Petraeus was sentenced to 2 years probation and a $100,000 fine after pleading guilty to leaking highly classified information to his biographer and lover, Paula Broadwell. This comes after Trump has spent months calling for Hillary Clinton to be jailed for her use of a private email server when she served as Secretary of State, despite being cleared of wrongdoing by multiple FBI investigations. Donald Trump also met with President Nixon's Secretary of State Henry Kissinger Thursday at Trump Tower. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper has submitted his resignation, sparking renewed calls for him to face perjury prosecution for lying under oath to the Senate in March 2013, when he was questioned by Senator Ron Wyden about the government's secret surveillance program.
They collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans.
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
Clapper later defended himself by claiming he had answered the question in the, quote, least untruthful manner, unquote. His resignation will be effective on Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2017. The New York Times is reporting Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is weighing the possibility of joining Trump's administration, a move that may violate U.S. anti-nepotism laws. Kushner is the husband of Trump's daughter, Ivanka. He's been a key advisor to Donald Trump's campaign and transition team. Most recently, he orchestrated a purge of New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and his allies from the transition team. Jared's father, Charles Kushner, was sent to prison by Christie when Christie was New Jersey's top prosecutor. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party has elected New York Senator Chuck Schumer to be the Senate Minority Leader, despite opposition from protesters who say Schumer's ties to Wall Street make him unfit to lead the Democratic Party's opposition to Donald Trump. Earlier this week, protesters held a sit-in inside Schumer's office, demanding he step aside and instead support Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders for the position of Minority Leader. Instead, on Wednesday, Schumer was elected Minority Leader and then tapped Bernie Sanders as chair of outreach for the Democratic leadership team, a new position. Meanwhile, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren has become the latest Democratic Party member to endorse Minnesota Congressmember Keith Ellison as the next chair of the Democratic National Committee. He's the first Muslim member of Congress and co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. In San Diego, U.S. District Judge Gonzalo Curiel will hold a hearing Friday to consider a request by Donald Trump's lawyers to delay the class action lawsuit against Trump and his defunct for-profit Trump University until after the inauguration in January. The university has been accused of defrauding students. Trump is slated to testify at the trial, but his lawyers are trying to convince Judge Curiel to permit him to testify via videotaped deposition. They're also trying to withhold from evidence everything Trump has said, including in speeches and in tweets. During the campaign, Trump attacked Judge Curiel, saying his Mexican heritage makes him biased against Trump. The largest bank in Norway, DNB, has sold its assets in the companies behind the $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline, and it's considering whether to terminate 3 separate loans the bank has made to finance the project. The canceled assets were worth $3 million. The loans under consideration finance up to 10% of the pipeline's construction. Norway's DNB Bank is not connected to DNB First, which is based in Pennsylvania and is not involved in the Dakota pipeline. This all comes as Energy Transfer Partners, the company behind the Dakota Access Pipeline, is almost certain to miss the January 1st, 2017 deadline by when it's promised oil companies it would have completed construction, opening up the possibility the pipeline may lose its contracts with oil companies. In recent court documents, Energy Transfer Partners acknowledged that if the Army Corps of Engineers does grant the final permit to drill underneath the Missouri River, it would still take the company between 3 and 4 months to finish the project. It's still not clear whether this permit will ever be granted. Even if it's missing the January 1st deadline means oil companies will have the right to renegotiate or even cancel their contracts to have oil shipped through the Dakota Access Pipeline. These cancellations are likely, given that Bakken oil production has fallen by 20% since its peak in December 2014, the same year the contracts were first signed. Energy Transfer Partners has acknowledged in court filings, quote, loss of shippers to the project would effectively result in project cancellation, unquote. In Iraq, a suicide car bomb killed at least 30 people at a wedding Thursday. The Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the attack south of Fallujah. Among the dead was the groom, Saif Juma Majal, who was the son of a local tribal leader who'd been a vocal opponent of the Islamic State. In China, workers have staged a series of strikes and protests against Walmart, demanding better pay and working conditions. At least 20,000 of Walmart's workers in China have joined messaging groups such as WeChat in order to coordinate organizing against the company. This comes amidst a wave of labor organizing in China's service sector. Since July, workers have organized more than 120 protests and strikes targeting service companies, including Walmart. Palestinians are condemning two pieces of legislation being pushed by Israeli lawmakers. The first would ban mosque loudspeakers in efforts to silence the call to prayer, which sounds 5 times throughout the day. Right-wing Israeli lawmakers are claiming the call is noise pollution. The second piece of legislation would retroactively legalize Jewish-only settlements on Palestinian land in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. The measure violates international law. This is Palestinian leader Hanan Ashrawi.
We consider all settlements illegal, whether they are on public land or private land. But now it extends the confiscation of territory to private Palestinian land where settlers and the illegal Israeli occupation can steal, outright theft, Palestinian land, whether for public Palestinian use or private Palestinian property, in order to expand its settlement project, destroy the two-state solution, and at the same time impose greater Israel on historical Palestine.
In Guatemala, a judge has ruled former U.S.-backed dictator Efrain Rios Montt will face trial on charges of genocide for a massacre in 1982 that killed 273 indigenous people, nearly half of them children. On Wednesday, the judge ruled he'll be represented by his lawyers, as Rios Montt has been ruled mentally unfit for trial. Rios Montt was found guilty of genocide in 2013, but a court annulled his 80-year sentence less than 2 weeks later. Britain says residents of the Chagos Islands in the Indian Ocean who were forcibly removed for the construction of a U.S. military base in the early 70s will not be allowed to return home, despite 4 decades of organizing by the displaced residents who are demanding the right to return. In addition to serving as U.S. Air Base, one of the islands, Diego Garcia, has also played a critical role in the U.S. Extraordinary Rendition Program. This week, the British Foreign Office minister said instead of the right to return home, the Chagosians will be offered £40 million in compensation over the next decade. She also said the U.S. will be allowed to keep its military base on the island. Back in the United States, the number of reported hate crimes continues to surge in the wake of Donald Trump's election last week. The Southern Poverty Law Center has now documented at least 437 incidents of verbal and physical attacks, intimidation and harassment against Muslims, immigrants, African Americans, women, and people of color. The most commonly reported place where physical or verbal harassment occurred continues to be in K-12 schools. A for-profit immigrant family detention center in Karnes County, Texas, has banned migrant children held there from having access to crayons while their mothers meet with lawyers. Immigration authorities claim the ban is a response to children coloring on a table in the prison's visiting area, which, quote, caused damage to the contractor, unquote. The facility is operated by the private prison company Geo Group, which saw its stock price jump after Donald Trump won the presidential election. Human rights advocates are calling for the Obama administration to cut ties with the private prison industry and end family detention before the close of his term. And writer Colson Whitehead has won the National Book Award for The Underground Railroad, a novel about a young enslaved girl who escapes from a Georgia plantation. At the New York City Awards ceremony, Whitehead said, quote, "We're happy in here. Outside is the blasted hellhole wasteland of Trumpland. Be kind to everybody. Make art and fight the power," unquote. And in this breaking news, the Washington Post is reporting that Donald Trump has chosen Kansas Congressman Mike Pompeo as CIA director. Pompeo's opposed closing Guantanamo Bay prison. In 2013, he visited the notorious U.S. prison and said of the prisoners who were on hunger strike, quote, "It looked to me like a lot of them had put on weight," unquote. Pompeo also is a vocal opponent of the Iran nuclear deal. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We are broadcasting from the COP22 here in Marrakesh, Morocco. In what's seen by some as a direct response to the election of Donald Trump and his rejection of climate science, nearly 200 nations have agreed on a proclamation here in Marrakech, Morocco, declaring implementation of the Paris Climate Accord to be a, quote, urgent duty. This comes just over a week after Trump was elected president. He's vowed to pull the United States out of the Paris Agreement and has called climate change a Chinese-created hoax. Trump will soon become the only world leader who doesn't believe in climate change. This is Aziz Makour, Morocco's head negotiator at the talks.
We call for all parties to strengthen and support efforts to eradicate poverty, ensure food security, and to take stringent action to deal with climate change challenges in agriculture. We call for urgently raising ambition and strengthening cooperation amongst ourselves to close the gap between current emissions trajectories and the pathway needed to meet the long-term temperature goals of the Paris Agreement. We call for an increase in the volume, flow, and access to finance for climate projects alongside improved capacity and technology, including from developed to developing countries. We, the developed countries, reaffirm our $100 billion mobilization goal. We unanimously call for further climate action and support, well in advance of 2020, taking into account the specific needs and special circumstances of developing countries, the least developed countries, and those particularly vulnerable to the adverse impacts of climate change. We who are parties to the Kyoto Protocol encourage the ratification of the Doha Amendment.
That's Aziz Makour, Morocco's head negotiator at the COP22 talks, speaking after nations signed onto what's known as the Marrakesh Action Proclamation. Tina Johnson is policy director at the U.S. Climate Action Network.
And so it just became the signifying opportunity and moment for this COP to say that, you know, no one country, no one man, no one person can control the outcome of the destiny that we all see as part of the writing on the wall, that climate change is real, we need to act, and that we're going to do everything we can. So, yeah, I definitely think that the speeches over the last several days had that impact and effect on us as a civil society and over other countries as well.
Earlier this week, Frank Bainimarama, the Prime Minister of Fiji, appealed directly to President-elect Donald Trump.
I want to make a special appeal to the President-elect of the United States, Donald Trump, for a personal change of heart and a public change of policy on the issue of climate change. Sir, you have said that you do not believe that climate change is man-made, and you intend, as president, to cut off America's contribution to the global efforts to reduce carbon emissions. I am especially alarmed by reports that you intend to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, which would be disastrous for every person on Earth. I appeal to you to show the leadership that the rest of the world expects the United States to take on this issue. Please take another look at the overwhelming scientific consensus on the man-made effects of global warming. Please come as a matter of urgency to see for yourself the devastating impact that rising sea levels and extreme weather events are already having on our peoples and our way of life. President-elect Trump, I formally invite you to Fiji and promise you the warmest of welcomes. We will show you how we are already having to move entire communities out of the way of the rising seas. And you can meet the families of the 44 Fijians who were killed last February by the biggest tropical cyclone ever to make landfall in the southern hemisphere. I repeat, the world looks to America for leadership as we work together to confront this challenge to our survival and the well-being of our planet. President-elect Trump, I appeal to you for humanity's sake to show that leadership and to join our common cause. And I thank you.
That's the Prime Minister of Fiji, Frank Bainimarama. He will be the president of the next COP, which won't be held in Fiji. It'll be held in Bonn, Germany. Meanwhile, climate activists have staged a series of actions here at the UN summit, calling on world leaders to do more to address the climate crisis.
My name is Winona Casino, and I'm from the Marshall Islands. This is in the North Pacific. Right now, my people are the front line. We are affected by climate change. We're feeling it right now. The island is barely 2 meters above sea level. I'm speaking to you as a mother. I have 2 babies. Where will we go if our island sinks?
On Thursday, climate activists also staged protests here targeting corporate sponsors of the UN Climate Summit. They began by staging a die-in at the UN Climate Summit inside a pavilion sponsored by the Moroccan phosphate giant OCP. The action was led by the Indigenous Youth Caucus and Sustain Us to raise awareness about the economic and health impacts of the company's phosphates plant in the coastal Moroccan town of Safi. Protesters then moved on to occupy the booth of the Moroccan mining company, Managem, a Moroccan mining company which runs a massive silver mine that's been the target of protests for years by the indigenous Amazigh people of Amidar.
This action symbolizes indigenous and non-indigenous groups from both inside and outside of Morocco coming together to show the similarities of environmental atrocities communities around the world face. We wish to show how corporate sponsors of the COP contribute to greenwashing while ignoring environmental racism and classism. At the same time, people who live in these corporate sacrifice zones sadly pay with their lives and livelihoods without ever experiencing the privilege to walk into this space and draw attention to the injustices committed against them.
Yate, I come from the Navajo Nation, and I have been at Standing Rock while we were attacked by dogs and attacked with pepper spray. And since we are here in Morocco and we are guests to the people here, we thought it would be appropriate that we draw attention to the corporate sponsors, OCP and Managem, who are also causing similar atrocities not far from where the COP is right now. For example, in SB, where we are actively polluting streams and rivers and oceans, where there used to be fishing opportunities for the people who drop dead in the streets because they can't breathe the air. Or over here at Imidar, where our brothers and sisters have been occupying a space 300 kilometers south of COP22 because they are having their water drained in order to produce silver for an outside company, Managem. We would like everybody to please think of those people and think of their sovereignty and think of their rights as they are sacrifice zones to corporate greed.
Well, this is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. When we come back from break, we'll look at an issue that has barely received coverage here, the Moroccan occupation of the Western Sahara, which many consider to be Africa's last colony. Stay with us. Musicians playing during a demonstration here at the COP22 UN Climate Summit. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Marrakesh, Morocco. Here at the UN Climate Talks, one issue that's being largely ignored is Morocco's more than 41-year occupation of Western Sahara, located south of Morocco. Many consider it to be Africa's last colony. Last week, Moroccan authorities barred the Sahrawi political leader, Souelma Bayrou, from attending the climate summit, even though she serves as the vice president of the Pan-African Parliament. She was reportedly held by Moroccan police for 75 hours without food or water. Morocco also faced criticism after it briefly published a map on an official COP22 website that showed occupied Western Sahara to be a part of Morocco. The image was later taken down from that website. The UN considers Western Sahara to be a non-self-governing territory. In March, Morocco expelled UN staffers from Western Sahara after UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon referred to Morocco's rule over the region as an occupation during a visit to the Algerian town of Tindouf, which has been the home for Western Saharan refugees for 4 decades. One half of the Sahrawi population lives in the refugee camps, while the other half lives in the territory under occupation. Moroccan authorities also continue to block many international journalists and human rights organizations from entering the occupied Western Sahara. This week, I spoke to the British-based Algerian activist Hamza Hamouchine, who serves as the senior program officer for North Africa and West Asia at the British organization War on Want.
So I'm here for the COP to organize events around the COP22, but I'm not participating officially for the COP22. So we organize different events to be in solidarity with communities that are being affected by environmental injustices, by the neoliberal policies of the Moroccan monarchy. And I have attempted to travel to the occupied territories of Western Sahara 2 days ago, and I have been denied entry.
What happened? Where did you go, and how were you stopped?
So I started my journey from a southern town in Morocco called Gelmim. So I took a bus ride from there to Dakhla, and just before Tarfaya, just on the border between Morocco and the occupied zone, I have been ordered off the bus, and I've been informed that there are specific instructions coming from high up to not allow me to proceed to Laayoune.
And so what happened to you then?
So basically I waited for an hour, and they hired a taxi for me that took me back to Agadir, which is around 6-7 hours away. And they kept a close eye on me at every checkpoint. So we have been stopped around 5-6 times. They were checking my passports. They were calling the driver. So it felt a little bit unsafe.
So they drove you away 5 hours to where?
So they drove me, I think, more than 6 hours to Agadir, which is 3 hours away, or 3 hours and a half away from Marrakesh. And I spent the night there, and I came back the day after. But for me, that episode is just an example of how Morocco, the Moroccan monarchy, how the Makhzen, the king and the elite around him, does not want international people and people coming for the COP22 to know about its occupation of Western Sahara that has been ongoing for more than 4 decades now.
Interestingly, Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, was here, actually met with the king, though it doesn't look like the king wanted to exactly look at him, because he just recently called the presence of Morocco in Western Sahara an occupation.
Mm-hmm. So COP22, the climate talks that are being held in Marrakesh this month, an excellent opportunity for the Makhzen, which is the king and the ruling elite around him, to whitewash, their crimes, the repression, the authoritarianism, and also make people forget about the occupation that has been ongoing for more than 4 decades in Western Sahara. It's also an opportunity to greenwash the environmental crimes that the Makhzen has been...
and the Makhzen means?
Makhzen is the king and the elite around him. So basically the ruling class in Morocco, to greenwash the environmental crimes in Morocco and in the occupied zones. So I have been visiting different places in Morocco recently where people are suffering from big, huge environmental injustices. And one of them is the Imidar community that has been struggling with the Royal Holding silver mine in mine that has been, grabbing their resources, grabbing their water.
And explain where Imidar is.
So Imidar is in southeast Morocco, is around 7 hours drive for Marrakesh. So the community has been struggling there for years against this silver mine that has been polluting their environment, affecting their agriculture. And so this is, in a way, a contradiction between the narrative that the monarchy is trying to give to outsiders, that they are champions of renewable energy, that they are green, and all of that. But in reality, when you look deep down, you see a lot of environmental destruction. There is another example too, Safi, which is a town, an industrial town on the ocean, which is really a victim of the industrial policies of Morocco. There is actually now a coal-fired power station that is being built, and that will be operational in 2017. So at the time they are saying we are doing renewable energy, they are building a coal-fired power station, and that coal will be brought from Russia, Poland, and South Africa. But then, if you look deeply into the details of the renewable plans, you see that an important part of it is based on occupied territory. So without the approval of Sahrawi in taking the decisions and how those resources are being used.
The Sahrawi are the West Saharans.
Yeah, the West Saharans. So there is a report by an organization called Western Sahara Resource Watch, just released a few weeks ago, called Power in the Plunder, where they document all those renewable plants, wind and solar. And they mentioned an example of where a wind farm is powering the Bukra phosphate mine, which is in occupied territory. So basically, powering that mine to plunder even further the resources of the Sahrawis.
How difficult is it for people to get to Western Sahara who don't already live there?
I think the movements of the Sahrawis are monitored. So the Moroccan security services and the Royal Gendarmerie really monitor the movements of the Sahrawi people. For international delegations, so the moment they detect that those delegations are talking with human rights activists and human rights organizations, they deport them. There have been many examples in the past with delegations from Norway, from Spain, being deported the moment they detect them talking with human rights activists.
What are they hiding?
I think, to say it briefly, they hide in the reality of occupation, they hide in the reality of repression, they hide in the reality of the denial of the rights of the Sahrawis for their self-determination.
Share the history of Western Sahara.
So Western Sahara was a colony, a Spanish colony, till 1975. So when the Spanish left, the Morocco and Mauritania invaded Western Sahara. Mauritania retreated, I think, a year later, but Morocco still occupies that land and plunders the resources. And it's not just phosphate, it's fishing, it's tomatoes, it's agriculture. And Sahrawis do not have any input in the decision making. And I think this needs to be exposed, and the COP22 should not be allowed to be an opportunity for the Makhzen, the king and the elite around him, to greenwash their crimes and to whitewash the occupation.
There are amazing parallels to Indonesia's occupation of East Timor in 1975. Mm-hmm. But in 1999, the UN was able to sponsor a referendum for the people of East Timor, mm-hmm. and they voted for their independence, and now they're one of the newest nations in the world.
Yeah, I think that's what the Sahrawis wish to happen. They just want the right to self-determination, and the UN is supportive of that. Except that Morocco has the support of some Western powers, including France and the US and Spain, and that diplomatic and international support allows it to continue the occupation. So I think we need to exercise the pressure on the Moroccan monarchy as well as its backers and the multinationals that are complicit in the plunder of resources.
That was the British-based Algerian activist Hamza Hamouchine, who serves as the senior program officer for North Africa and West Asia at the British organization War on Want. He recently attempted to enter the occupied Western Sahara, but was stopped by Moroccan authorities on his way. Well, on Wednesday, I spoke to Constancio Pinto, the Minister of Commerce, Industry and Environment of Timor-Leste, or East Timor. East Timor was compared to Western Sahara for decades. Both countries were non-self-governing territories. They were occupied both in 1975, Timor by Indonesia, Western Sahara by Morocco. Both populations supported UN Security Council resolutions calling for referenda for self-determination, which East Timor got to vote in 1999 and voted overwhelmingly to become independent. The people of Western Sahara are still calling for that referendum to take place. East Timorese Minister Constancio Pinto just came back from East Timor, where on November 12th he was involved in the 25th anniversary observance of the Santa Cruz massacre, where the Indonesian military attacked using U.S. weapons, gunning down over 270 Timorese. He was a lead organizer of the peaceful procession. I asked him his thoughts on the anniversary.
Well, the Santa Cruz massacre for us is a national day. It's a turning point for the struggle of Timor-Leste, pursuing the independence. It took so long, over 20 years, to get the world to know the suffering that we have endured during the Indonesian occupation. And therefore we honor this date, the 25th anniversary of the massacre, where 270 lives was taken by the Indonesian army in a cold-blooded way. We continue to do this in order to keep the flame of a spirit, nationalism and patriotic sentiment among the young people. Because the young people, sometimes they think that the independence was a gift given by the Indonesians. So we have to tell them, maintain this spirit that the independence was a process. It took a long time, and many of our family, our Timorese citizens, lost their life for that, for this independence. And of course, we continue to celebrate this also in honor of the contribution of the international community, especially the journalists, people like yourself, Amy Goodman, Mark Stahl, and others, because you were the people who, although Timor-Leste was so difficult to get into, you managed to go to Timor and cover the stories and then publish it abroad. Without you, I think the world may have not yet known what's happening in Timor-Leste. The independence of Timor-Leste may also delay. So that's why we continue to do this, I think. And for us, 25 years is an important day for us, 25 years.
That is Constancio Pinto, the Minister of Commerce, Industry and Environment of Timor-Leste, or East Timor. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Donald Trump has just tapped Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions to be his attorney general and Kansas Congressman Mike Pompeo to head the CIA. Well, as Trump assembles his cabinet, we look at one of the communities that have been the most targeted through his immigration policy that he has talked about during the campaign, Syrian refugees. Over the course of the campaign, Donald Trump called them terrorists and incorrectly accused them of carrying out violent attacks in the United States. Trump has repeatedly said he would end all immigration to the U.S. by Syrian refugees and others from what he called terror-prone nations. This is Donald Trump speaking last month.
We're not going to take the risk when it comes to the safety of the American people, no longer. So let me state this as clearly as I can. If I'm elected president, I am going to keep radical Islamic terrorists the hell out of our country.
The 5-year Syrian conflict has displaced about half the pre-war population, with more than 6 million Syrians displaced inside Syria and nearly 5 million Syrian refugees outside its borders. Close to 500,000 Syrians have been killed in the ongoing war. Here in Morocco, according to some estimates, there are thousands of Syrian refugees, though exact figures are difficult to determine. On Thursday evening, Democracy Now! Spoke to several Syrian refugees here in Marrakesh.
I am from the Hama province in Syria. My name is Hassan Khardak.
And how did you come from Syria to Morocco?
I came from Syria, then I crossed into Lebanon, and I stayed for 1 year in Lebanon. And I have prepared my passport before the war, and when the war waged, it became very tough for me. And I have 6 daughters and 3 youths. I had to flee from there to Morocco. I came from Beirut and then came to Algeria, and then I crossed into Morocco through Oujda.
Why did you come to Morocco? Is this your final destination, or do you hope to go elsewhere afterwards?
I have never left Syria, and this is the first I had to leave this country. We came here to Morocco, and we thought we would stay 4 or 5 months and then make it back to Syria. But now I'm here for more than 2 years. We never thought we'd be staying in Morocco for so long.
How was your life in Syria? How did it change? What is the situation there right now?
My life in Syria was very good, and as a poor person, I had a very good life in Syria. I was working with people, but because of the war, I had to leave. Now I came with no money, and I'm out here sitting in the streets.
How has this conflict impacted your children, and what future do you hope for them?
Yes, the war has affected us all. It has impacted everything. No school, no money, no nothing. And as I say, I have 10 children. They don't go to school now. This is catastrophic.
After speaking to Hassan Khardak in the Medina, or Old City, we drove toward the outskirts of Marrakesh. We met a mother and a daughter who fled to Morocco from Syria in 2012, a year after the conflict began. They did not want to show their faces out of fear for their safety.
I am from Idlib, from Syria. My name is Zainab Al Hassan.
And you're standing here next to your daughter. What is your name?
Ghalia.
How old are you?
13.
And how did you get to Morocco?
We went first to Beirut in Lebanon, and then crossed to Egypt, and then from Egypt to Algeria.
What was life like in Syria when you left?
It was very difficult. People were killing each other. We were looking at a horrible situation in Syria. We saw a man who stood in front of us and said, "Enough, you have to get away, you have to get away."
Do you have other children in Syria?
I have 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls in Syria.
How long have you been in Morocco since leaving Syria?
Now it's 4 years.
What has it been like for you to leave Syria as a young child?
It was very difficult for me. Yes, we found that we had very big problems. We had to cross the borders. We had a lot of hardship.
You're a child. What is your hope for the future? What do you want to do when you grow up?
I'm studying now. I go to school. I want to be a surgeon.
In the United States, there's a leader who says that no more Syrian refugees should come to our country. What is your message in response to people who are trying to close the borders off to people fleeing the situation in Syria today?
I want to ask him why they want to close the borders first. Syrians have suffered very much. Why should they close the borders in our faces? They should help us because we've gone through a lot of suffering and lost everything.
Syrians have suffered a lot, so enough suffering.
They cannot close the borders because there will be a lot of people coming. They cannot close the borders. There are children, there are parents, there are mothers, there are women. We have to go to Europe and other countries. We've been disdained, and things are very difficult for us during the years we've spent outside Syria. Now we're undergoing a very difficult kind of life.
What are some of the difficulties you face as a refugee?
We don't have a home. We lost our home. We lost our belongings, everything.
We have lost a lot of people in Syria, children, and they're still dying there.
What would it mean if foreign leaders made it more difficult for Syrians to leave and get asylum abroad?
It would be better to die if they closed the borders.
That report by Democracy Now!'s Dina Guzder. Special thanks to Nermeen Sheikh and John Hamilton, and to the Arabic-English translator Sabir Tarawat. While interviewing Syrian refugees here in Marrakesh, the Democracy Now! Team was stopped numerous times by Moroccan police, both plainclothes and in full uniform. Police forces repeatedly demanding to see press credentials, questioning the reporters about their reporting. They also followed the team from the bustling center of Marrakesh to the suburban outskirts of Taraga, Douar Sidi Daou. After we finished interviews, police then followed the team back to the Riad, the traditional Moroccan house in the old city of Medina. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. Stay with us.
Whoa, oh, mercy, mercy me. All things ain't what they used to be. No, no. Where did all the blue skies go? Poison is the wind that blows from the north and south and east. Oh, mercy. All things ain't what they used to be. Have mercy, Father. Have mercy. Please have mercy, Father. Please have mercy. Oh, help us, Father. Have mercy. Please help us, Father. Have mercy. You, Lord, help us, Father. Please have mercy. Oh, help us, Father. Oh, please help us, Father. Father, help us, Father. Have mercy.
That was Hakan Özkan with a remix of Marvin Gaye's Mercy, Mercy Me. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from the COP22, the UN Climate Summit here in Marrakesh, Morocco. I'm Amy Goodman. In what's seen by some as a direct response to the election of Donald Trump and his rejection of climate science, nearly 200 nations have agreed on a proclamation here in Marrakesh declaring implementation of the Paris Climate Accord to be a, quote, urgent duty. This comes just over a week after Donald Trump was elected president. He's vowed to pull the United States out of the Paris Agreement and has called climate change a Chinese hoax. Trump will soon become the only world leader who doesn't believe in climate change. Meanwhile, a headline in the Washington Post Thursday read, "The North Pole is an insane 36 degrees warmer than normal as winter descends." The Washington Post reports this is the second year in a row that temperatures near the North Pole have risen to freakishly warm levels. We're joined now by two guests. Dipti Bhatnagar is the Climate Justice and Energy Coordinator at Friends of the Earth International, based in Mozambique. And Vijay Venkat is the Senior Assistant Editor at The Hindu, based in India. Her most recent piece, Marrakesh Action Proclamation Sends Out Strong Signal on Climate. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Dipti, let's begin with you. As the summit wraps up, what has been accomplished here?
So I think there's been a shadow cast over this entire 2 weeks of COP22 here in Marrakesh, with the President-elect Trump being elected in the U.S. And I think that the global community here has really come together to give a strong response to that. We've seen the countries step up and say that they're still in, they will move forward. But what we haven't seen here is those words being turned into action. And that has, I think, been the unfortunate bit here at COP22, because what we really needed to see here was a ramping up of ambition, a ramping up of the targets that the developed countries especially put on the table in Paris last year, because those were absolutely not enough to stay under 1.5 degrees C.
The Obama administration's in power for another 2 months. What do you want to see in this period?
I think that John Kerry made a very strong verbal commitment.
He was just here
when he spoke at the press conference the other day, really committing that the U.S. has taken some steps forward and those cannot be reversed. And I think those are really strong words. Now it's time really for the U.S. to turn those into action, because the U.S. was one of the developed countries which was not meeting its fair share of targets. It did not pledge enough based on what its fair share historically and currently should be. And I think one of the things that we would like to see from President Obama and from the other developed countries, this isn't only about the U.S., this is about all of the developed countries really needing to step up their emissions reductions targets and finance, because without that, the energy transformation in our countries in the South is going to be very, very difficult. And that's what's needed to stop this climate catastrophe.
Vijay Venkat, talk about what you're covering here. You're coming from a country. Do you live in New Delhi?
No, I live in Chennai.
About New Delhi and what's happening, the reports we're getting of the level of air pollution off the charts.
Okay. Well, basically, my focus of coverage at COP22 is not just India, but I'm looking at the global reactions coming in. Because in the true spirit of the Paris Agreement, everyone is supposed to get together and act on climate change. So I guess it's a bit unfair if you focus on just one country. And talking about pollution in India, yes, it's a big problem. In fact, Greenpeace just recently came out with a report saying that the number of pollution deaths in India are higher than the number of pollution deaths in China. So that's like one of the things where we beat China. We killed more people from pollution, which is not a good story. But I also think that Delhi, being the capital, gets a disproportionate amount of attention in the press. Climate change has had a severe impact in India. The drought for the last 2 years, consecutive years of poor rainfall, has meant that a huge amount of people have been affected by it, especially farmers. In fact, the numbers run into something like 330 million people affected by drought. So that's a much larger number, and I genuinely feel that the issue of agriculture and farmers being affected, and I'm told that agriculture has been dropped from the Paris negotiations here at Marrakesh. So concerns about agriculture, concerns about adaptation. How do countries like ours, which are affected by climate change, adapt to these? They have not been addressed.
Your response to Donald Trump's election could be the first major world leader to deny climate change.
Well, I really feel that given all the scientific evidence that exists, if a world leader denies it doesn't exist, then there's something really wrong with him. Because, I mean, as journalists, we have been putting out one story after the other. the glaciers retreating. For example, in India, I mean, I traveled to Gangotri in May, which is the source of the Ganges River, and the glacier has retreated by 3 kilometers. And that's massive, and that's evidence in front of you.
I want to thank you both for being with us. Vijay Venkat, Senior Assistant Editor at The Hindu, as well as Dipti Bhatnagar, who is Climate Justice and Energy Coordinator at Friends of the Earth International, based in Mozambique. As we end today with a poet and activist from the Marshall Islands sharing a poem about climate change.
My name is Kathy Jetnil-Kitchener. I'm from the Marshall Islands, and I'm about to perform my piece, my poem called 2 Degrees. The other night, my 1-year-old was a fever pressed against my chest. Together, we wrestled with a thermometer that read 99.8 degrees. The doctor says technically 100.4 is a fever, but I can see her flushed face, how she drapes across my lap, listless. Libanum is usually a wobbly walking toddler, all chunks and duck-footed shaky knees, stomping squeaky yellow light-up shoes across the edge of the reef. And I think what a difference a few degrees can make. Scientists say if humans warm the world more than 2 degrees, then catastrophe will hit. Imagine North American wildfires increasing by 400%, freshwater declining by 30%, animal extinction rising by 20%, thousands, millions left wondering what happened. At a climate change conference, a colleague tells me 2 degrees is just a benchmark for climate negotiations. I tell him 2 degrees is a gamble. At 2 degrees, my islands, the Marshall Islands, is already underwater. This is why our leaders push for 1.5. Seems small, like 0.5 degrees shouldn't matter. Like 0.5 degrees are just crumbs. Like the Marshall Islands must look on a map, just crumbs you dust off the table, wipe your hands clean of. Today, Libanum is feeling better. She bobs around our backyard, drops pebbles and leaves into a plastic bucket before emptying them out and dropping them in again. As I watch her, I think about futility. I think about the world making the same mistakes again and again since the Industrial Revolution, since 1977, when a scientist said 2 degrees was just an estimate. On Kele Island, the tides were underestimated. Patients sleeping in a clinic with a nuclear history threaded into their bloodlines woke to a wild water world, a rushing rapid of salt, a sewage of syringe and gauze. Later, they wheeled their hospital beds out, left them resting in the sun. They must be stained, rusted, our people creaking brackish from salt spray and nuclear radiation blasts, so tired. Wondering if the world will leave us out to dry in the sun. Will they dust their hands of us, wipe them clean? My father tells me that Irik, the Marshallese word for when the tide is nearest in equilibrium, is the best time for fishing. Maybe that's what I'm doing, fishing for recognition, writing the world, willing the world to find its balance. So that people remember that beyond the discussions, beyond the policy, the statistics, there are faces all the way out here. There is a baby stomping squeaky yellow light-up shoes across the edge of a reef, not yet underwater.
Okay. That was Kathy Jetnil-Kitchener of the Marshall Islands. And that does it for our broadcast. A very special thanks to our local crew here in Marrakesh. Rania Khader, Danya Nader, Phil Hasty, Mohammed Shama, Sean Russell, Ahmed Galal, Amr Yassin, and Fatima Zara. Happy birthday, Fatima. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Newman Sheikh, Carla Wills, Laura Gottesdiener, Dina Guzder, Sam Alkoff, Robbie Karen, Hani Massoud, Tarina Nadur, Andre Lewis. Special thanks to Nicole Salazar, John Hamilton, Dennis Moynihan, Renee Phelps, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, and Paul Huckabee, our engineers. Special thanks to Miriam Barnard, Rob Young, Becca Staley, Julie Crosby, Hugh Grant, David Prude, Ariel Boone. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us from Marrakesh, Morocco.